The session will be all about oracles, and I'll briefly introduce myself. So I'm Nidhi. I work as a core protocol engineer at Verachain, and I've recently started a YouTube channel where I'm focusing on creating educational content related to Web3. And I have been in the software engineering space for close to 8 years now. I have been an engineer so far, and like earlier, I was working in the enterprise blockchain space, which falls under the Hyperledger umbrella. I'm not sure how many of you knows about it, but then I've transitioned to public space, which is like the Ethereum space, and I've joined Verachain. It has been 8 months so far, and it's going pretty well. Like the space is challenging and exciting to me because I come from a different background. So yeah, that's pretty much, and let's get started. So today we'll talk about oracles. So just give me a show of hands. How many of you know what oracles are? Okay. And rest of the folks are hearing about oracles for the first time. Okay, perfect. And like what is the like how much are you guys aware about Web3 in general? Like do you have some basic idea about what blockchain is and how it works? Okay, perfect. So okay. Yeah. Okay, so oracles are like a middleware that helps to connect blockchain to the external system. And what I mean by that is oracles are like a bridge between the blockchains and the external data that resides outside the blockchain, that is on the internet or anywhere else. And if you are wondering, like, why do we need something like oracles? Like, it's a middleware, right? So why do I need it in first place? Why can't blockchain just directly access the data from outside? Right? Some of you might be having that question. So why it is like that is because blockchains are designed to be deterministic in nature. And blockchains are closed system. What I mean by that is blockchains have access to the data that resides on the blockchain network. The data that resides on the blockchain network is called on-chain data. Okay. And the data that is outside the blockchain network is called off-chain data. So blockchain have access to certain data which resides there, and they don't have access to the data which is outside the blockchain. So they are like a closed system. You can understand it that way. And what I mean when I say deterministic is the consensus algorithms that we have. Okay, consensus is like an agreement that the nodes try to come in on a common state of the network. Okay, so different nodes are there in the blockchain network, they try to come to a common state. So the consensus that we have, the nodes that are doing the consensus, they can answer questions in like yes and no form only. What it means is, like if you ask the node, are the signatures valid? Are the transactions valid? They can say yes or no, but they can't give you like subjective data. So there is no way the nodes can fetch the data outside the blockchain network. And even if they try to fetch it, everybody will have different data, right? And then there's no way you can come on agreement to one state because everybody will try to fetch the data maybe at different point of time, and then we'll have some like there's no way we can come on consensus. So that's why these oracles are being introduced, and they play like a very important role in blockchain smart contracts. So if you see smart contracts, like the oracles are the one that make smart contracts really smart, if I put it that way, because they allow you to access a lot of things that are not within the scope of a network. I hope it all makes sense so far, like what are oracles and why we introduced them. Okay, now let's talk about what are some of the real world applications of oracles so that you guys really understand where it is being used. So one of the major use case of oracles is in the DeFi space. So DeFi is decentralized finance. It's just like the finance space that has been brought on blockchain. Blockchains are decentralized in nature. So in the DeFi space, let's say if you want to fetch the price of a certain cryptocurrency, you want to fetch price of ETH or like Sol, anything, that's why you use oracles. And if you want to fetch like what is the exchange rate for a certain currency, let's say I have ETH, now I want to swap it with dollars, so I need to know the exchange rate, right? So that's another use case where we use oracles. So DeFi is one of the major space where oracles are being used, and then they're also used in the insurance sector. So Any ideas how it would be used in the insurance sector? Anybody can pitch in?
If someone, let's say life insurance,
Yeah.
if someone dies,
Yeah.
you really check if they died or not.
Right. I mean, that's like, yeah, that's a valid one. So basically, you have insurances, right, and you want to pay out money only in certain cases. And all these cases are happening in the real world. It doesn't happen on blockchain. So like Ovia mentioned, in case of like a death insurance, you want to ensure that the person has really died.
We're
Right?
calling the same person again.
What?
We're calling to the same person whether he is
He's died,
alive
no,
or
how
dead.
can you call him?
No, not.
That's a cheating.
Like you have this death certificates, right? So how you can access that?
Check with the hospital.
Yeah. So if somebody is having like a valid death certificate, then you know, okay, that person is no more. And usually it's being used in the case of like farmers, they have the crop insurance, right? So, and if you want to bring that farmer crop insurance on blockchain, we need to know when I need to pay the loans, when I need to pay the amount back to the farmer. And it depends on how the weather is, how the temperature is, right? All these insurance have certain conditions. And that's something that can be known through oracles. And then one of the most popular thing is prediction. So all of you might be interested in predictions, let it be sports prediction, anything. So the data for the prediction comes from outside world. Let's say there is a cricket match going on. You and a friend decides to place a bet, saying that okay, India will win. Other person is saying maybe Australia will win. And how does a smart contract know which team is going to win? So it's again external data that will fetch through oracles. And other use cases, NFTs, the non-fungible tokens, and any clue how oracles would be used in non-fungible tokens? Any idea? No? Okay. So NFTs require a identifier which is unique to them, and this identifier being unique requires some sort of randomness, right? Because every identifier is unique, I need randomness, and randomness is where oracles really come in. And randomness is one use case where it's not external data, but still we use oracles and there are reasons to it. Let's say if you're starting out and you think your smart contract can, create the random numbers itself. And I've seen people creating random numbers using block hash, block time, but none of that is secure. Because the validators or miners, they can manipulate and influence the network. So if you really want to generate secure random numbers, like in NFTs or in gaming, we want randomness, right? So you have to use oracles, and that's the secure and recommended way to do it. So these are some of the use cases. There's a long list, and yeah, it's just basically to give you some idea about how oracles play a very crucial role in day-to-day life. Yeah.
Creating that identifier, you are saying.
Yeah.
Regarding creating the identifier, so we can use the algorithm, SSC algorithms. It will take care of creating the random numbers and appending to that and create the hash function of that identifier, right? So separately, we don't need to specifically use any randomness using this oracles.
That is another way, but then what you are doing is essentially you are creating randomness of the chain, like how Web2 systems do, right? Your randomness is not residing on the chain. So if you use an oracle, you'll generate random words. The proof that determines how these random words are generated is also stored on the blockchain.
So random will be stored. I mean, we don't need to store the random numbers, right? Because whenever again we are creating, again a random number will be created and C1, C2, that ciphertext will be created.
Yeah, I think we are okay. I'll cover briefly.
So just to give you
Yeah.
so these are generally called as verified random
Random,
functions.
yeah.
What that means is you are verifying the way the randomness of that function is. So you could just write, for example, you could create a server, right, and you could tell me that hey, I am providing you random numbers. But what is the function that you're using to create the random numbers is a black box for me.
Yeah.
Like one of the major points of like
Cyclic functions
blockchain. Yeah. So, but I don't know what you're using, right? So one of the main advantages of having Web3 is also transparency. So if you're able to verify that a function is truly random, then you believe that whatever output it gives, it will be random. So that verification of randomness can be done using Oracle. So you
Yeah.
can look up this thing called VRFs, verified random functions,
Sure.
and that's
Yeah.
Sure, thank you. I'll
Yeah, so Gyan is right. There is this concept of verifiable random functions in oracles, and that's why we store the proof along with the random numbers that we have. So yeah, and now let's move to the categories of oracles. So there are different categories of oracles. I'll start with the basic one. So there's something called hardware versus software oracles. As the name suggests, hardware is the oracles are able to extract the data through hardware. So these could be like IoT devices, RFID sensors, or any hardware devices. And hardware oracles are majorly used in the supply chain use case, where you want to track how your products or how your fruits, how your medicines are being shipped throughout. Then you basically place like the IoT sensors on the lot to track the temperature, humidity of that particular product. And that's where the oracles come in handy. And then we have software oracles. So here we are trying to extract the data through digital APIs, any web services, like anything that is in the form of software. So to give an example for software oracles is, let's say if you want to build something where, if you want to build a decentralized application on blockchain where you are trying to do something related to weather data. So the weather data is available on internet in the form of weather APIs. So in that case, if you fetch the data for weather using the weather APIs, it falls under software oracles. Then we have centralized versus decentralized oracles. So this briefly touches the point that you were talking about. So let's say if you create your own service, right? There's no guarantee whether the service is centralized or decentralized. So it's like the centralized means I'm trying to fetch the data from a single entity. And whenever in engineering space, if you hear the term single entity, you should stay away from it. Because if there is a single entity, you won't know when it can go down or when the data could be corrupt. So single entity is something like single point of failure. In reliability we call it, and we try to avoid it as much as possible. So if some of you decides to create an oracle yourself saying that, okay, I'll use this. So it's like there could be just one entity and it's not accurate. Or it could be like the person running the entity could have different intentions. Like, so centralized oracles are still there, but we have to use them with very caution. And then we have decentralized oracles, which are pretty famous in this space. It means the data is getting aggregated from n number of operators, and it clearly means that now there is no single point of failure, and now you can trust the data because there are n number of operators or entities that is providing the data. So let's say there are 5 operators that are providing the data, and one of the operator is having like not good intention, and it needs to provide the wrong data. So in that case, if 4 entities are providing the right data, then the system is having consensus and it will be like a decentralized oracle, because still I can trust the data because the majority is providing the correct data. And then we have another category called inbound versus outbound oracles. So inbound oracles are where data is coming from external world into the blockchain, like all the examples that we have talked about, weather APIs, price free data, exchange rates, and it's most common in today's world. Outbound is something where blockchain needs to emit data outside. One of the use case could be, let's say you want to do some events based on your decisions that are being taken in the smart contract. So let's say smart contract is emitting some event and you want to do some real world activity based on the event that was emitted. So that falls under the outbound category of oracles. And yeah, these are the major ones. There are a lot of categories, but these are like the topmost categories to keep in mind. So we will actually see a demo where we will use a decentralized oracle. So yeah, let's get going. Okay, now I want to touch upon what are the blockchain oracle protocols that are there. So we have touched like why do we need oracles, what are the use cases and categories. So if you see here, this chart is for Ethereum. If you see, Chainlink is having the majority, which is 51%, and then there are other oracle protocols that are doing like they are like still in the space. So if you see, Chainlink is the major player, and then there are certain positions being taken by Chronicle, Pyth, and then rest of them. And the data that we see here is from a website called DeFi Llama. Okay. If you are new to the Web3 space and if you want to get insights about what's happening in the DeFi space, so you should definitely check out this website. Like it's really provide you data for different categories. This is just one of the category. but if you go there, you can see a lot of data. And it's like a good starting point, because if you want to see what is the next thing that is coming up, right? What protocol is gaining a lot of traction, you can track this website. And maybe I'll go to the website and then show you how it looks like. We will talk a little bit about the technical architecture of oracles. So the oracles basically are having architecture of two sorts. One is the push-based and other is the pull-based. Majority of the oracles in the industry follow the push-based architecture. What I mean by that is you have a source system and then you have a target. Target is something which are we as consumers. So in push-based oracle, the source system will continuously be updating the real-time data, and if I want, I have to just call the smart contract of the source system. And this is like Chainlink is one of the protocols that uses it. Even Chronicle uses push-based oracle, and it has been there for some time now. So now there is another architecture which has emerged and which is doing quite well in the DeFi space, which is pull-based oracle. What it means is, me being a smart contract consumer, like me, if I'm writing a smart contract, I want to get the data, I'll fetch the data. So nobody is pushing the data, I'll fetch the data and I'll pay what I'm using. It's like on-demand oracle. So you will call the oracle, you will get the data, and then only you will perform some other transaction. So these are the two architectures that we have. The pull architecture is being followed by Pyth, which is gaining a lot of traction these days. And yeah, that's basically about the architecture. If you want to read more in depth, Pyth has documentation for this. They have covered what's the difference and in which case you should use what. So usually I've seen in push-based oracle, what happens is, since the operators are pushing the data, what happens is many times this data is stale, like it's not updated, because it's the operators that are updating, right? And in the case of pull, because I am fetching the data, there is high probability that the data will be fresh and accurate. So that's basically the architecture design, and both of them have like pros and cons. You will see one kind of architecture being used in other use cases, and if you see pull-based is something that is used very much in the DeFi space, because you want the latest data always, right? Because it's all about money at the end of the day. If the data is not accurate even by decimals, it will cost you a lot in the finance space. You want to ensure that the data is accurate. So that's about the architecture part. And yeah, now let's get to the demo. I'll also show you guys the website that I'm talking about. So this is DeFi Llama, the website that I was mentioning. Here they have different dashboards. The data that we got was from this oracles category. And this is how it looks like. It shows the data right now for all the chains. I'll select Ethereum, and this is like the data that we have seen. And okay, is it clear to everybody so far before we dive into the demo? Anybody's having any questions? Okay, so how many of you have already interacted or experimented with Chainlink in the past? Okay, a lot of hands. How many of you interacted with Python in the past? Okay, so
directly, I'm not sure. We are using multiple DeFi apps. Indirectly, we'll be using any one of these oracles only.
yeah, as an end user, you might be using it. I mean, all of us, because we use DeFi. Yeah.
For me, most of the things I know earlier, right? Chainlink only. Most of the
Yeah,
things. Earlier,
yeah.
band was there, but
Yeah.
the band went away. I think. I'm not sure if they
Yeah.
have it. But after this Solana hype, hype launch and it took off. So currently, only those two really use.
Yeah, that's right. So being an end user, all of you might have interacted, because if you use a prediction marketplace app, like a sports betting app or anything, you are interacting with oracles, not knowing you're interacting with them because you're an end user of them. But the protocol, the developers that have written the code, they might have implemented it in the backend. So I know Chainlink has been there for a while, and then a lot of people know about it. So let's move to Python this one, because I want all of you to learn something new by end of this session. So let's okay. let's go to the Pyth website. Okay. Okay, so this is how it looks like, and they clearly say it's the blockchain oracle for market data. What it means is Pyth is focusing on DeFi space right now, and why is that? Is they provide the data in very low latency. So the latency, like they provide the data in 400 milliseconds, which is very low latency in the DeFi space, and that's what we need. So. And they support data not just for crypto. If you see here, Pyth provides data for equities, forex, and commodities. But for this demo, we'll stick to the crypto part. And they also have like a white paper. If you want to read more about it, like how it came up and all the technical aspects, you can go through the white paper. And currently, it supports 80 plus blockchains. And okay, one more important thing to note here is it's like a first party data. What I mean by that is the financial institutions that are there, like the exchanges, market makers, they provide their data directly to the network. It's not like some service provider is aggregating the data. It's like the financial institutions are themselves providing the data. That's why it's called first party data. And because it's first party, you know you can trust it. Because these are the people that we use, like Binance is listed, and OKX is listed, and certain other market makers are listed. And so this is like the data we can trust. Yeah. Another thing is, like as we have talked about, it's a pull oracle, so we get the data on demand. And even Synthetics, which is a perps built on Ethereum, is using Pyth. So it's like really competitive and good to use Pyth. And okay, they have provided different means of integrations. So either you can integrate Pyth directly into your smart contracts, or you can integrate it into your front end as well. For this demo, we'll stick to the smart contract part because that's what we'll focus on. So yeah. Now let's move to the demo. I hope you got some overview about Pyth in general and why we'll talk about it. So, okay, another catchy thing to note here is, if you see on this website, okay, I think it's not fully loaded. I see some of the numbers missing. Okay, it's okay. So, I'm connected to, yeah, I think it's fine. Okay, the point was, if you see this website, the Pyth is having a lot of volume in the last 30 days. What it means is a lot of people are using it in production in the Ethereum, like in the space, not in the Ethereum space, but this is the data for the Ethereum. So it's good to know another protocol. And now let's go to the demo part. So if we see for the developers, okay, let's go to the developer guides. And okay, they have provided this different section. One is like the build section, which is for anybody who's a builder. Builder, you would be interested in the build section. If you're a learner, if you want to explore more like the architecture of Pyth, then see the learn section. For us, we will be like a builder in this one, and I'll show you how you can create your first Pyth app. So, okay. For the rest of the documentation, for the rest of the demo, we won't be following the docs. I have a repository created for you, so we'll follow that repository. So this is the repo that we have, and this is what we are going to follow. Okay. So, like once you go home and if you want to try it out, you can just fork or clone the repo and do this exercise on your own. It's very easy. I've listed everything in the README file, so you shouldn't face any issue. Just check the README file and follow along. You should be able to like build your first Pyth app, right? And link to this, I'll share it with you guys if possible, or it's there in my YouTube playlist. I'll anyways make sure that all of you have the link available. So certain prerequisites are, for this, for this demo, we'll need to install Node.js, right? And then you need to make sure that Foundry is installed. So how many of you are aware about Foundry? Okay, okay. For those of you who don't know, it's like a smart contract toolchain. It lets you do n number of operations with your smart contract, and it's really friendly for developer. If you're a developer just getting started, you need to check out Foundry for sure. And then it allows you to like deploy your smart contracts, build your contracts, allows you to write tests for a smart contract. So it's like a complete tool chain that we have. So that's what we require for this. And once you install Foundry, there will be two tools, two binaries that will be installed when you install the Foundry itself. So one binary is called Forge, other is called Cast. So these are like the prerequisites, and then you can get started with the demo. So, okay. So yeah, I have already taken a clone of the repo in my local. This is Visual Studio Code, and if you see, the first thing that we do is build the contract. Okay, I'll take a minute to walk you guys over the source code. So this is like the typical folder structure for any smart contract. You will find a SRC folder that will have the source code. You will find link folder that will have the libraries, which are the dependencies needed for a smart contract. And then there could be like a test folder. You will write unit test.
I
For
just saw
this
it.
demo purpose, I am
Morning
not
it was
writing the unit
98.
test, but feel free to do it as an exercise for you. That will be like a good learning. So if you see this, this is the contract that we have. It's called price feed. Is the font visible?
Maybe for the last, you can increase a bit more.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, okay. How many of you have already coded in Solidity? Okay, then I won't have hard time explaining you. Okay. So this is the contract name that we have, and for this one we will be using the iPipe, which is the interface for pipe that lets you get the price feed data. For this demo purpose, we'll focus on fetching the real price of ETH in USD. And ETH is the native token for Ethereum. We'll try to fetch its price, what the price is currently in dollars, USD, sorry. So we have imported this iPipe, and then we have created like a state variable. If you might be wondering, like the import doesn't seem complete, you are right. We have this remapping called txt, which lets you define the shortcut or the alias for the dependencies that you're using. So this is where the actual dependency is. It's a node modules because it's a node project, and then we have given it like a shortcut, and that's what we'll use in the smart contract. So that's the first statement, and then this is like the whole contract. We have created like a state variable for the interface. There's something called ETH price ID. Okay. Okay, so this is the constructor, and it requires two arguments. One is the Pyth contract address, and second is the ETH USD price ID. This could vary. Like in your case, if you're trying to get the price of BTC, you will have the price ID for BTC. It depends on the pairing that you're using. Because it's ETH/USD, I'm using it, but in your case, it will vary. And this is what we are initializing in the constructor. We are doing it here so that we don't have to make like an extra function call. So I'll walk you guys from where you can get these two parameters for the constructor. And then we have like three functions. The first function is to get the ETH price data. Okay. And okay, if anybody of you have worked with Python already, can you tell me if I try to run this function, will it be like a success or a failure? I'll explain you what it does. So this is the state variable for the iPipe. I'm calling the function called getPrice no older than. Okay. And here I'm passing the price ID and the age. What it means is I want to get the ETH price in USD, which is no longer than 300 seconds, which is no longer than 5 minutes. That's the price I want to get. And then once I have the price, I'll return it. So One second. I think. Okay, fine. Yeah. So if we go to the IPyth interface, there is this function, right? And it returns your price that is no older than age, and it will return you some structure that you see, right? If we see what's there in the structure. Okay, so this is how the Pyth structure looks like. It has certain number of fields. It has a price, a confidence interval, exponent, and the publish time. But in our case, we were interested in just getting the price, so we have done price dot price. But if you want to get certain other details, let's say you want to get the exponent or you want to get the confidence interval that it has, feel free to get that. So this is how this structure looks like. And if you see, this is what I was talking about. Like we're trying to get the price field from the struct that we have, and we will cast it into int256 and then into uint256 because the price can't be negative, right? It can only, it's a number. So, and that's what will return. So yeah, I was talking about, can anyone tell me, like, will this function run fine or it will have issues? What do you guys think? Any guesses? I'll give you a hint. It's related to the architecture of Oracle that I talked about. And now you know Pyth is a full-based Oracle, right? So do you think it will work or not? The get call, this function.
Shouldn't you pay for it? Shouldn't you pay for it for actually getting it? Because
I am just doing a get call, right? If you see, I'll just take this function. It's a get call, it doesn't require you to pay anything, right? It's just a view call. So what it means is a get call. You're not required to pay anything. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the function definition in case you're thinking it's not a syntactic error like syntax error. It will compile fine. But it's about if you try to do a transaction, if you try to interact with this function, will it work or not? That's the question.
might fail if the feed is not there.
It will what?
Might fail if the data is not there. Like the older data.
Right. That's right. So the thing is, since it's a pull-based Oracle, if you try to call it and if it's not having like the accurate data, the updated data, the data which is within 300 seconds, it will fail. Okay. And that's the reason if you are using a pull-based Oracle, you have to ensure that you are first updating and then fetching. And then when you're trying to update, you will pay for it. You will pay only for what you are using, right? It's like you pay for what you consume. So if I update, I'll pay, and then once I have the updated data, I'll use it. So this function, if you try to run it, it will give you an error, and this is different from how other oracles work. Like in other oracles, a get call might have worked just fine. Like it would have you return the error, it would have returned you the data that the oracle has updated, but it won't work here. And then we have this other function called update price. So this is what we were talking about in the Pyth interface only. There is this method called get update fee, where we are passing the price update. I'll come to this in a bit. So basically what we are trying to do is we are trying to get the update fees because I need to pay something to get the updated data, right? And what I need to pay is this update fee. So whenever I'm calling this function, it's payable. I'll pay some ETH to make the function call. So this is the update price feeds. It will take the value, which is the ETH that you will pay, and then this is something that I'll talk about in a bit. And then we have this another function which is update and get. Same thing that we are doing. So here we are first updating. If you see, this is the function for update, and then we are getting price. So this is how this function will work, because here you are updating and then getting, right? And yeah, so I hope the source code is clear. To all of you, let me know if any questions are there. It's like a very basic thing. We are just trying to get the data, but you can play around. Like in this case, let's say you want to do something with the data. So you can have another function where you're passing the data to, and then you have your own business logic there. Any questions so far with the source code? It's just a one Solidity file which we have, and then you can just clone it at, like you can clone the GitHub and just run it. Okay. if we are sorted, okay, so let's go to the README. So README has all the details that you need to follow. So first, what we need to do is we need to build. So building is basically compiling your source code. So in my case, since it was already compiled, I get no files changed. But if you are running this repo for the first time, you will see your source code getting compiled, and it may take some time for you to compile the code. And then I was talking about this test. Since we don't have any test folder, so we can skip, but I would suggest if you guys want to get hands-on, try writing some tests for this smart contract, like try writing some positive and negative scenarios, and then you can simply run it by this command once you have it. This is the command that we use for formatting. Okay. So now, okay, let's try to deploy the smart contract on Sepolia testnet. Okay. So for this purpose, we'll use the Ethereum public testnet, which is called Sepolia, and this is how you deploy a smart contract. The source code is residing in the SRC folder. The file name is price feed. That's why you see the .sol extension, and this is the contract name that we have. And you need to pass in the private key, RPC URL, the constructor arguments. Okay. I'll switch back because now you might be wondering, how do I get these arguments, right? Like in this case, you see two fields, they're already filled. But if you're trying it on your own, you might be thinking, what are these hard-coded values? So let's go to the Python documentation, the developer guides, and go to this reference material. You have contract addresses. We'll go here. And then if you see, I'm interested in the Sepolia. So we have okay. I think every L2 is having their own Sepolia, so it's difficult to search. But yeah, this is the Ethereum Sepolia testnet, and this is the address that we are interested in. This becomes the first argument, and if you wanna cross verify, you can go here. I'll do a search, it matches. And in your case, this could be anything. Like if you are performing, it depends on the blockchain that you have. In my case, I'm focusing on Sepolia. I'll copy this, but let's say you may be performing it on Polygon, Optimism, or Base, so anything, it will change. So make sure to come to this part and then copy your appropriate address that you're interested in. And now there was this other thing that we saw, the second argument. I'll go back. Okay. If you check the constructor, this was the first argument, and this is the ETH price ID, ETH USD price ID, which is the second argument. So if you see, we can click on this price feed IDs, and here we should be able to find the ETH USD pairing. This one. And if I copy it and if you go to README, that's the one. So what you need to ensure is the first argument is specific to the blockchain. The second argument is specific to the crypto pairing that you are interested in getting the price for. In my case, it's ETH USDC, but in your case, it could be like Bitcoin to USD, or it could be anything. So make sure to change these arguments if you want to try something else. And this is what will pass as the constructor's arguments.
Can we try Bitcoin USDC because Bitcoin twice crossed 100K?
Okay, we can try that. For that, we just have to, again, for that. Okay, so this is the BTC USD. So what you need to do is you just need to like replace the variable here, and then it will work. So okay, so I have already exported the private key, I think so, and we'll just export these variables and then deploy the smart contract. So let's do it. And the first parameter that you see here, the Sepolia RPC URL, it will also vary. So this is the RPC URL for the public testnet, but if you're trying it on mainnet or Polygon testnet, it will vary accordingly. So I've already exported them now, and if I try to deploy the smart contract, it has already compiled. It's deploying right now. And if you are pretty new to the Web3 space, if you want to do all of that, like you see, I have a private key. It is a private key of my wallet. So you need to have a wallet created first. In my case, I'm using MetaMask. It could be any wallet, and then you get the private key. And don't expose your private key to anybody. And that's how you get the private key. And one thing that you need to ensure is, for doing anything with a smart contract, you need to have funds. What I mean is, you need, if I'm an Ethereum network, I need to have ETH. And for test network, you can get the ETH easily from the faucets. So there are a lot of faucets available, because on testnet it's not real money, right? So you can just get the ETH from faucet, and then only you should be able to come to this reading and then try. Otherwise, it won't work. So I think it's taking a little long. Not sure it's due to the internet or yeah, probably due to the internet. So basically the idea is, once you deploy, you will get a smart contract address. That's the address where your smart contract is deployed. What you will do is, you'll copy that address into this variable called deployment address, and that will use it further on. So like false create you can use for deploying, and then now I want to interact, I'll use the cast CLI. How many of you have used cast before? Cast CLI. Okay. So cast is a binary that comes in inbuilt with the Foundry. What cast does is, it lets you do the RPC calls. Okay. Once you install the Foundry, you just type cast -- help. Everything will open for you, and you can basically see. I'll just do it. If I just type cast, you can see all the parameters and the commands that are there, right? So in this case, we are using cast call, which is just to perform a call on a account. It's like we are doing a get call in simple sense. So wherever you see call, you associate with a get call. It means we are just getting something. So I don't think I have any luck with deploying. I mean, it's not giving anything as well, so it's not failing. So I'll proceed further. So so now the fun thing is, I have shown you 3 functions. Now you might be wondering, okay, the smart contract is compiled, it's deployed. Now what is next? So now we want to interact with these functions, and how we do that is through cast, and depending on the what type of function it is, we'll use call or another means. So if you see here, this is the deployment address where the smart contract is deployed. This is the function name. This is the RPC URL. And since my function was not having any parameters, it's like you don't see anything in here. But this will essentially give you an error, as we discussed earlier. And now I hope all of you know the reason behind it, like why this will give error. Is it clear? Okay. Anybody who doesn't understand why this first get call will give error? Okay, perfect. So, and then what? Okay, there was this one more thing that we talked about. If you see in the update price, there was some variable which was like bytes array, right? And we were not sure from where this is coming. So now we will talk about it. If you see, we need to call Hermes API in Python to get the price update. And Hermes is like a web service which the Python team has created. What it will do is, it will listen to the Python network and the wormhole network for the price updates. So basically, Python is having its own network called Python network, which is running on Solana. It's like a blockchain network that they have. And if you want to get the update, you will use the Hermes API. So this is like a curl call, because it's a REST API. We'll call the API, we are getting the data out of it using JQ utility, and then we will store it in the text file. So if you see in my case, I already have it here. So if you run it for the first time, you should be able to see a text file created along with the data that we got from the curl. And this is what we will use for calling the update and get or the update function, right? Because this function requires the parameter, the input parameter, and we are getting it from this txt file. So if you see here, we also have the updated data. Now we will try to call the main function that we have, which is update and get. And if you see, we are using the send. Any ideas why we are using cast with send and not with call? Any ideas? Anyone? How?
We are doing a state change, not a call.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Or you all agree to what he's saying? You didn't hear. Oh, can you speak little louder?
I just told like we are not doing like a view function or instead we're doing like a state change. So we're sending the
Yeah, here we are updating it, right? We have to pay the fees.
so we're doing a state change rather than a view function call.
Yeah. Okay, that's partially correct. I mean, if you remember, I was showing you guys this update call, right? So basically, in Python, if I have to update, I have to pay because I need the data. So that's why we are having the send call, because it will publish a transaction on the blockchain network. And this was the function that we had, and this was like it's like the function definition that you have, and this is the input argument. In our case, we were passing the txt file, so I have like done cat and appended 0x with it. And okay, finally, I see something positive on screen. So finally, the smart contract has deployed, and this was the address that I was talking about. This is what you need to copy and paste it in the deployment address. And after this, if you want, you can call the get call. So let me quickly do it for you. Okay, so I'm just exporting. This is the address. This is smart contract address. Okay, exported. Now I want to do this get call to show you it fails. And okay, so when I was trying to learn the Python, I've spent quite some time in understanding why the get call fails, because it's different from other oracles, right? And I was like, why my transaction is failing, and that too with a weird code which makes no sense to me. So that is something that I learned and I want to share with you. So if you see, let's go to the Python in the error codes. Okay, we have EVM. Okay, there's something called stale price, right? All these are the error codes that come by the pipe. Okay, and we have like an error code for stale price. In get call, you will see the same error code. And if you see, now you know the reason behind it. Like I've spent days in figuring out what this get call is, because the documentation is not pretty clear regarding that. So, okay, perfect. So the get call has failed. And that's the reason why I've run it with trace flag, because I wanted to show you guys the trace. And if you see, there's a custom error. So this is something which is intended to happen. So don't worry if you see this error. That's how the Python is designed. And if you copy this custom error code and go here, it matches, right? What it means is get call is not giving me data within 5 minutes from now. Okay. And when I was recording the video, in my case, I was having the age as 60 seconds. So by the time I could hit, every time it was like stale data. So that's why I increased the time also, so that I can show you guys. But feel free to play around with that age parameter. Usually the DeFi space, that parameter will be very less, like in seconds, because we want the real world data. Like I can't have like a 5 minutes data working on a DeFi app, right? It will create blunders. So this is what the error is. And so now let's get the price update from the Hermes API. So now the curl call has been done and this file has been updated. Now we will call the update and get call. I think this will take some time, but basically the idea is once you update and get the price. Okay, there's another thing. I'm not sure this will. Okay, we'll wait. So the thing is, the price data that we'll get for each will be like a very long number. For you, it won't make any sense. By itself doesn't have this concept of floating points on decimals. So that's why you have seen the pipe structure that I've shown you. It had a field called exponent, if you guys remember. So if you see, it had a field called exponent, and that's why I'll take you back. Okay, you see this field called exponent. So this is how you depict the price. So in case of ETH, it will be like -8. What it means is you get a very big number. You have to chop off 8 digits and put a dot there. Then you will be able to read it. So I think my execution has reverted as expected in a live demo, but it's fine. So yeah, that's the idea. So you will have to convert it. So this is how you will do it. Convert that hexadecimal to decimal, and then get like the actual result. Like it could be like 3500, whatever. So that's the idea. And this is like an exercise for you. So I think that's pretty much about the demo. If you want to like follow along, like once you go home, so here is the repo that I have under my.
I created a QR code for this repo. So shall I airdrop
Oh,
it to you?
yeah. Or let's do one thing.
Can you switch on your airdrop? I will.
I'm just thinking another way. Let's do like that. Okay. So this is my YouTube channel, in case you don't know. So check it out. I already have this video uploaded. You can find the repo link in the description of the channel. And yeah, the plan is to create more videos. Okay, perfect. I hope you guys have scanned it. I'm planning to do more fun stuff. And let me know if you have any questions regarding it. I know you guys couldn't do a demo. The plan was all of you have your laptop and do the demo. I like apologize for that. I mean, due to the internet connection and stuff, it's not possible. But the repo is ready for you. Just have to clone it and then just follow the README blindly. You certainly have to change certain parameters, but it's not that a big deal. And maybe write tests, play around with it, and yeah, see how it goes for you. Any questions anybody's having? No? Okay. I hope you guys had fun and learned something new. Thank you so much.